Welcome to the store. Don't forget to subscribe, and support me.
The air in the village of Thornridge carried a scent of soot and metal, heavy from the forge Leah had spent the better part of the day working in. The rhythmic clanging of her hammer against steel resonated through the small settlement, a sound as familiar as her own heartbeat. In a world where magic ruled, Leah had found solace in her work, creating tools and weapons for those who had no access to the mystical powers that dominated their society. She was a blacksmith, and in her hands, metal bent, shaped, and sharpened, transforming from something ordinary into something with purpose. But purpose didn't come easily in Elder. The kingdom had been under the thumb of the Mage Council for as long as anyone could remember. The mages ruled everything: taxes, laws, and even the very air one breathed felt controlled by their invisible grip. Magic was power, and those without it were little more than pawns, exploited, oppressed, and reminded daily of their inferiority. Leah had never been one to complain. She had accepted the harsh reality, her work at the forge providing a modest but respectable living in a world where respect was rare for someone like her. But deep down, she seethed that it was late one evening when everything changed. Leah had been forging a sword for the Mage Guards, the elite soldiers who enforced the council's will. As she prepared the hilt, something caught her eye in the metal, a faint, unusual glow from within the molten ore. She narrowed her eyes and brought the piece closer, the dull orange hue of the firelight dancing across its surface. "What is this?" she muttered to herself, pulling a small tool from her apron pocket to pry at the metal. The glow intensified for a moment, as though the ore had a life of its own. With a final tug, something gave way. A tiny, glimmering shard fell into her hand. It wasn't a gem or crystal, it was something else, something ancient. Leah's brow furrowed as she inspected it. It looked almost like a fragment of glass, but it pulsed faintly with energy, a mixture of magic and something else. Something she couldn't place. She had seen many enchanted items pass through her forge, but nothing like this. Without realizing it, she had stumbled upon the key to revolution. In the days that followed, Leah couldn't let go of the strange shard. She worked at night, in secret, testing it, combining it with different metals and materials. She wanted to understand what made it tick, what made it hum with such raw potential. Her instincts as a blacksmith kicked in. She wasn't just going to let this go. She had to figure out how to harness its power. Weeks passed. Her curiosity turned into obsession. She barely slept, her eyes red and strained as she hammered away, combining the shard with various alloys, pushing the limits of what she thought possible. Each failure only spurred her on. Then, one fateful night, she succeeded. The shard, when melded with steel, transformed the metal into something remarkable. It became resistant to heat, to pressure, and, as Leah would soon discover, to magic. It was a breakthrough. Leah tested the newly forged armor by taking it into the village square, where a mage had set up shop, extorting the local farmers with promises of protection. She approached, wearing a breastplate lined with the enchanted metal. The mage sneered, unimpressed by her silent approach. "You there, blacksmith?" the mage called, his voice thick with condescension. "What brings you to the square? Looking for trouble, are we?" Leah met his gaze, unflinching. "I'm just passing through." The mage raised a hand, ready to cast a spell, perhaps a simple display of power to remind her of her place. The air crackled with magic as he released a bolt of energy straight toward her. Leah braced herself, but nothing happened. The spell fizzled out before it even reached her, dissipating into the air like smoke. The mage's eyes widened in disbelief. What did you do?" Leah said nothing. She turned and walked away, leaving the mage standing there, mouth agape, as the crowd murmured in shock. Word spread quickly after that. Leah's armor, crafted with the secret blend of magic and technology, had repelled the spell. It was unheard of. It was revolutionary. Soon, whispers of rebellion began to spread like wildfire. It didn't take long for others to find Leah, those tired of living under the heel of the Mage Council. They came in small groups at first, then larger numbers, seeking her out for her skill and for the hope her invention brought. Among them was Darren, a former soldier who had been crippled in one of the many wars fought by the mages. His left leg was useless, twisted beyond repair from a battle long past, but his mind was sharp, and his knowledge of strategy unmatched. "I hear you've made something special," Darren said, limping into her forge one evening as the sun set. Leah didn't look up from her work, but she knew who he was. "That depends on your definition of special," she replied, hammering a piece of metal into shape. Darren leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "Word is, you've figured out how to fight magic. You've got people's attention." Leah straightened and turned to face him, wiping the sweat from her brow. "And what of it? Are you here to tell me I'm going to get myself killed?" Darren smiled faintly. "Quite the opposite. I'm here to tell you that you might just have a chance." For the first time in a long while, Leah allowed herself to feel a sliver of hope. She had been working in isolation for so long, unsure of what to do with the power she had discovered. Now, with Darren's support, she could begin to think bigger. She could begin to think about rebellion. The next few months were a blur of preparation. Darren helped organize the growing group of rebels, training them in combat and strategy. Leah worked tirelessly to create more armor, forging piece after piece in secret, always wary of the mage guards who patrolled the village. The rebels knew they were running out of time. The Mage Council wouldn't ignore the growing unrest for much longer. Leah's armor proved invaluable in the small skirmishes they fought. The mage guards, used to overwhelming their enemies with spells, were caught off guard by the resistance. Their magic had no effect on the armor, and without it, they were no match for the rebels' raw strength and determination. But it wasn't just the armor that kept the rebellion going, it was Leah's leadership. She had grown into her role, no longer the solitary blacksmith, but a leader who inspired those around her. She spoke to the rebels with fire in her voice, her determination contagious. "We've lived in fear for too long," Leah declared one night before a raid on a mage outpost. The rebels gathered around her, their faces grim but resolute. "They've used their power to keep us down, but we've found a way to fight back. This isn't just about armor. This is about showing them that we're more than what they think we are. We're more than their pawns." The rebels cheered, their spirits lifted by her words. They marched into battle that night with renewed purpose, and when they returned, they brought with them not just victory, but hope. Yet, even as the rebellion gained momentum, Leah knew they were far from winning. The Mage Council was vast and powerful, and for every small victory, the mages would retaliate with greater force. It wasn't long before their movement faced its first major defeat. The betrayal came from within. One of their own, a man Leah had trusted, had sold them out to the mages. For a promise of safety and riches, he had revealed the location of one of their secret camps. The mage guard struck hard and fast, ambushing the rebels in the dead of night. By the time Leah and Darren arrived with reinforcements, it was too late. The camp had been burned to the ground, and many of their fighters lay dead. Leah stood in the smoldering ruins, her hands clenched into fists, her heart heavy with guilt. She had led them into this fight, and now she had failed them. "I should have seen it coming," she muttered, staring at the ground. "I should have known." Darren placed a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't your fault, Leah. Betrayal is part of war. We've lost a battle, but the war isn't over." Leah nodded, but the weight of the loss pressed down on her. She had always known the risks, but seeing the cost in the faces of the dead and the wounded made it real in a way that nothing else had. Despite the setback, the rebellion pressed on. Leah grew more cautious, tightening security and carefully vetting those who joined their cause. Darren's tactical mind became even more crucial as they planned their next move. Leah knew that if they were going to win, they needed to strike at the heart of the Mage Council itself, Eldoris, the capital city. Leah's eyes hardened as she looked out over the horizon, the distant silhouette of Eldoris just visible in the fading light. The city was a fortress, protected by powerful magic and guarded by the Mage Council's most elite enforcers. Taking it would be no easy task, but it was their only chance. "We'll hit them where it hurts," Leah said to Darren, her voice steady. "We'll take their crystal." Leah's eyes narrowed as she studied the map of Eldoris spread out across the table in front of her. The city's layout was daunting, a sprawling labyrinth of streets and alleys all leading toward the towering Mage Citadel at its center. The citadel housed the source of the mage's power, a massive crystal that had fueled their magic for centuries. Destroy the crystal, and their reign of terror would crumble. Darren leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowed in thought. "We'll need to hit them hard and fast. The longer we're in that city, the more time they have to retaliate. We'll be walking into a nest of vipers." Leah nodded, her mind racing through the possibilities. They had a small window of opportunity, one shot at this. There wouldn't be a second chance. The rebels had grown in number, but they were still vastly outnumbered by the mages and their forces. Speed, precision, and stealth would be their only advantages. "I'll lead the strike team," Leah said, her voice firm. "We'll take a small group, those we can trust. The rest will cause distractions at the city gates, draw the guards away from the citadel." Darren nodded in agreement. "It's risky, but it could work. We'll need to create enough chaos to keep the Mage Council focused on the outskirts while you slip inside." Leah's heart pounded in her chest as she gathered the team for the mission. Each member of the strike group had been chosen for their loyalty, skill, and courage. They wore the armor she had crafted, armor that had withstood every magical attack thrown at it. Leah herself was suited up, the familiar weight of the steel giving her a sense of calm in the face of the danger ahead. As they approached Eldoris under the cover of darkness, the city loomed large before them, its towering walls and spires casting long shadows under the moonlight. The air was thick with tension, and Leah could feel her pulse quicken with each step. This was it, the culmination of everything they had fought for. The distractions worked. Explosions rang out near the city gates, and the mage guards rushed to quell the chaos. Leah's team slipped through the shadows, avoiding the main roads and sticking to the narrow alleys that wove their way through the lower districts. The citadel towered above them, its silhouette sharp against the night sky. Darren's voice crackled in Leah's earpiece. "The guards are moving toward the gates. You've got a clear path. Now's your chance." Leah motioned for her team to move. They sprinted through the streets, ducking behind corners and slipping past patrols. The citadel's main entrance was heavily guarded, but Leah had anticipated this. Instead of charging through the front, they scaled the outer wall, using the cover of night to conceal their approach. As they climbed, Leah's thoughts raced. She had prepared for this moment for months, but now that they were on the verge of facing the Mage Council's full force, doubt crept in. What if they failed? What if they couldn't destroy the crystal? What if they lost more lives tonight? No. She couldn't think that way. She couldn't afford doubt. Not now. They reached the top of the wall and dropped silently into the citadel's courtyard. The crystal chamber was located deep within the fortress, guarded by layers of magical traps and barriers. Leah's heart pounded as they moved deeper into the labyrinthine halls of the citadel, every step bringing them closer to their goal, and closer to danger. The first wave of guards appeared as they turned a corner. Leah didn't hesitate. She swung her sword with precision, the enchanted blade slicing through the air. The guard spells fizzled harmlessly against the armor, and within moments, the rebels had taken them down, but they were running out of time. The closer they got to the crystal chamber, the more heavily guarded the halls became. Leah's team fought their way through, their movements coordinated, their strikes swift. The sound of clashing metal and the crackle of failed spells echoed through the stone corridors. Finally, they reached the door to the crystal chamber. Leah's pulse raced as she pressed her hand against the cold stone of the door. The barrier shimmered with magic, a glowing seal that blocked their path. It was a spell unlike any Leah had encountered before, ancient, powerful, and designed to keep out anyone who didn't wield magic. She took a deep breath and stepped back, examining the seal. There had to be a way through. The crystal was just beyond this door, so close. She could feel its presence, the raw magical energy radiating from within the chamber. One of her team members, a woman named Celine who had once worked in the archives of the Mage Council, stepped forward. "I think I can break the seal," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "It'll take a few minutes." Leah nodded, her eyes scanning the hall behind them. "Do it. We'll hold them off." Celine knelt before the door, her fingers tracing the intricate patterns of the seal. Leah and the rest of the team formed a defensive line, bracing for the inevitable onslaught of guards. The minutes dragged on, each second feeling like an eternity as Celine worked to unravel the spell. Then, just as Leah had feared, they heard the sound of footsteps, heavy, armored footsteps. Reinforcements. The mage guards rounded the corner, their weapons drawn, their eyes glowing with magical power. Leah's heart raced, but she held her ground. The rebels clashed with the guards, their armor deflecting the magical attacks that would have otherwise obliterated them. Leah fought with everything she had, her sword flashing in the dim light, her body moving with the precision and grace of a seasoned warrior. But the guards kept coming. Leah could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on her, the fatigue of months of fighting threatening to overwhelm her. Her arms ached, her breath came in ragged gasps, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. "Not now," Celine let out a triumphant cry. "The seal's broken." Leah turned, her heart soaring with relief as the door to the crystal chamber slowly creaked open. She motioned for her team to follow, and they rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind them. The chamber was massive, its walls lined with ancient runes and glowing softly with the light of the crystal at its center. The crystal itself was enormous, suspended in the air by an invisible force, its surface pulsing with raw magical energy. It was beautiful and deadly. Leah stepped forward, her eyes locked on the crystal. This was it. The source of the mage's power. The thing that had kept them in control for centuries. She raised her sword, her grip tightening on the hilt. All it would take was one strike. One blow to shatter the crystal and end the mage's reign. But before she could move, the air in the chamber shifted. A presence filled the room, dark and oppressive. Leah's heart skipped a beat as a figure appeared before the crystal, a man cloaked in black, his eyes glowing with the same eerie light as the crystal itself, the head of the Mage Council. "Serious, so," he said, his voice cold and mocking, "you've come to destroy what you cannot understand." Leah's grip tightened on her sword. "Your time is over, Sirius. The people won't live under your rule any longer." Sirius smiled, a cruel, twisted smile. "You think you can stop me? Stop us? You're nothing but a blacksmith. A pretender. He raised his hand, and the crystal pulsed with energy. The air around Leah crackled with magic, but her armor held strong, repelling the assault. She rushed forward, her sword aimed at the crystal, but Sirius was faster. He moved with inhuman speed, intercepting her attack with a flick of his wrist, sending her flying across the room. Leah hit the ground hard, pain shooting through her body. She struggled to her feet, her vision swimming. Sirius was powerful, more powerful than any mage she had faced before, but she couldn't give up. Not now. With a fierce cry, Leah charged at Sirius again, her sword flashing in the dim light. Their blades clashed, the sound ringing through the chamber. Sirius was fast, but Leah was determined. She ducked and weaved, avoiding his spells, using every ounce of strength and skill she had learned over the months of fighting. Finally, in a desperate move, she feigned left and then swung her sword upward, aiming not at Sirius, but at the crystal. The blade struck true, shattering the crystal with a deafening crack. The room filled with a blinding light as the crystal's magic exploded, sending shockwaves through the chamber. Sirius let out a scream of rage as the power drained from him. His form wavered, his magic crumbling without the crystal to sustain it. In a final, desperate act, he lunged at Leah, but she was ready. With one swift motion, she drove her sword into his chest, ending his reign once and for all. The chamber fell silent. Leah stood there, her chest heaving, her sword still in her hand. The crystal was gone. The Mage Council's power was broken. It was over. As the light from the shattered crystal faded, Leah turned to her team, who stood in stunned silence. They had done it. They had won, but the cost had been high. Leah felt the weight of everything settle on her shoulders, the lives lost, the sacrifices made. But there was no turning back now. They had broken the mage's hold on the world. They had given the people a chance to rebuild, to live free from the tyranny of magic. She sheathed her sword and turned toward the door. "Let's go home."